Good morning. My name is Alex Sains, and I'm speaking to you from Avon Valley Churches, a group of 7 churches on the northwestern edge of the New Forest in Hampshire. I imagine most of you are watching this through Facebook or YouTube, and I wonder how you feel about it, or about social media in general, because that's what I want to talk to you about today. If you're anything like me, you will have a love-hate relationship with it all. How many times have I gone to delete my Facebook or Instagram account, or made a pledge to only check it once a day? The trouble is, however much we hate it, there is some good there too. And whether we like it or not, we live in a world where social media is very much part of it. It's pervasive and in everything that we do. You can't buy dog food or fill your car with petrol without seeing an invitation to like a Facebook page or follow them on Twitter. And churches have changed. It would have been unthinkable to get a phone out in church a few years back. But churches are now much more relaxed about people using their phones to take photos, to tweet, or to use them for devotional reasons. The rise in different apps or our use of social media is changing the way that many of us worship or live as Christians. From reading your Bible on your phone, to listening to a daily reading or prayer, to following community groups, churches, spiritual leaders, to watching services and thoughts for the day on YouTube. Our phones have become one of our most important possessions, not only as human beings, but also as Christians. So we may hate social media sometimes, but it is also important to have a conversation about it, because if we don't engage in it, we may lose out on some of the really good stuff. But the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this today is because I've actually had a pretty rough time on social media recently. And it's made me think about our behaviour on social media and the impact it can have on others. Let me tell you what happened. One afternoon at the beginning of October, I got a phone call from someone at work who'd just taken a call from a speech therapist who works in the Midlands. She wanted me to know that there were some horrible things being said about me on Twitter, and she was worried about me. I don't often go on Twitter, but I do have a Twitter account. So I logged on, and there in black and white were all these tweets criticising my books and me as a person. Scrolling back to the beginning, I could see that it started with a parent who took objection to one of the activities in one of my books, posting a picture of it and commenting how awful it was that her son's school was going to use this book to teach him social skills. The sad thing is that if she'd reached out to me with that original post or original point, I would have happily discussed it with her, as some of her points I actually agreed with. But she took to Twitter, and suddenly I was being judged by over 2,000 people who didn't know me. Probably most of them had never used any of my books. So many wrong assumptions were being made on so little knowledge. But it didn't stop people commenting and retweeting many times. But what really amazed me was the way it got so personal. Some people took the time to look me up and then were commenting on my class, my colour, and even my faith. Over 500 tweets in loads of different threads being retweeted over 2,000 times. It was like a nightmare. It felt like in a matter of hours, my 35 years of hard work and love and passion for my subject was being trashed and reduced to nothing. So for about a month, I felt pretty sad and depressed. I put my head in the sand. I said I didn't want to think about it or do anything about it. But Brian got angry. He said I had to talk to my publishers and get some advice, and ultimately I had to respond. So after a month of feeling sad, and with their support and some quiet persuasion from Brian, I got up early one morning and I wrote a right to reply to those people who'd been so critical. I put it out on my Twitter feed and on my personal and work Facebook pages. And then, as well as some lovely supportive comments and tweets, I was actually able to have some constructive conversations on Twitter with some of the people who had been so critical. So it ended up being okay. But what have I learnt from the past few weeks? Well, I suppose the first thing I've learnt is what it feels like to be trolled. Is that a word? So what is a troll, for those of you who don't know? Well, trolls are no longer funny little dolls or scary characters from a fairy tale. Trolls are people who post comments online with the intent not to engage or even disagree, but to upset others. They write inflammatory messages meant to provoke an emotional response, and they're often quite successful at it. Some trolls are undoubtedly sociopaths or sadists. Some are just looking for a fight, and some are just ignorant. But some also may be under a lot of stress and are just letting off steam online when they're having a bad day. Of course, if we knew why they were trolling, it might help us to choose whether we should ignore or respond. Because, when people attack us, our instinct is often to want to defend ourselves. However, it is dangerous. When we answer them, we're opening ourselves up to their target practice, and that can have further consequences. So what are my take-homes from this experience? Well, my first one is that our words have consequences. I know this isn't groundbreaking, but during the month when I was in a bit of an emotional decline, I kept thinking, thank God this didn't happen in 2019. If this had happened while I was also coping with my mum's death, I don't know what I would have done. Words have consequences. We see the impact that words have on people all the time. This bullying that has almost become the norm. Another form of road rage, these keyboard warriors attacking people online. And young people, of course, are the most vulnerable to this. It's believed that over 95% of teenagers are on social media and 60% have been bullied online. And suicidal thoughts and attempts among teenagers have nearly doubled since 2008, making suicide the second leading cause of death for individuals aged 10 to 34. And the sad fact is that teenagers are almost twice as likely to attempt suicide if they've been bullied online. And it's apparently all getting worse. The BBC published a report last week that found that online hate speech in the UK and the US has risen by 20% since the start of the pandemic. And in particular, racist hate speech spiked around major news events such as the COVID outbreak, the Black Lives Matter campaign, and the murder of Sarah Everard. But it's not only national events. We see it here in Fordingbridge on our local community Facebook pages. People just saying mean things to each other. Things that you would never dream of saying face to face. Just in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 2 posts from administrators of local Facebook pages saying that they will not tolerate abusive comments on their pages. We do all have a responsibility to use our words wisely, verbal or written, as you just never know what impact they will have on someone at that moment in time. Which takes me to my second take home. Pause before you publish. It's probably a good thing to pause before you publish anything, just like it's ideally a good idea to think before you speak, but particularly when we're upset or angry. When someone attacks us, yes, it's human nature to want to fight back, to defend, to argue our case, but we should always pause before we click send. We need to think about the fact that our words or pictures we post are going into a vast public record, there for all to see, our bosses, co-workers, church members, potential employers, family, friends. So think before you speak. Think about what you want to say, even if it takes a month, like it did for me. Then when you've written it, maybe ask someone to read it, and hopefully they'll help you to choose and maybe delete your words carefully. My third take home is that our online behaviour has consequences. It is a known fact that all social media platforms have algorithms that affect what we see. I buy something from an ethical clothes store and suddenly I'm suggested other ethical purchases. Sometimes this is handy, of course, and sometimes it's a pain. But what really struck us about what happened to me was that Brian was the one who was mainly keeping an eye on Twitter and what was being said. He was looking into some of the people who were tweeting, particularly purely to see if there was anything we needed to be particularly worried about. However, after a short time, Brian's newsfeed changed. He was being fed news from angry people posting about autism and racism, all because he'd been looking at those people who'd been attacking me. What we click on, what we like, follow, will affect what we see on our newsfeed, and therefore maybe what we believe and what we think. We are being fed information that is tailored to what they think you want to see, which then leads to what is known as confirmation bias. So you look at or follow one dodgy post or person, and guess what? You'll see more dodgy stuff that confirms the previous dodgy stuff. In the film The Social Dilemma, which I think everyone should watch, by the way, they talk about the fact that social media warps our perception of truth. The truth being presented to us by news feeds is dependent on factors such as geography, psychology, algorithms, and demographic information. In other words, truth varies by user. So be careful and don't assume something is true just because it pops up on your Twitter feed. Finally, as someone who is interested in social communication, it's pretty obvious to say that social media is changing the way we communicate as a society. But as I said in the beginning, it's not a black and white issue. We love what social media can bring us, and we are richer for so much of what it allows us to do. But we also hate what social media can bring us, and we are poorer for what it allows us to do. So does that mean we should stop all social media? I don't think so, but I think it means we have to be wise. Social media can easily rob us of our time and our attention, and it can also rob us of our self-esteem and our mental health, and that is not okay. Let us end with a short prayer. Dear Jesus, help us to walk and talk wisely today, to use speech that is gracious and kind, to use discernment when faced with a truth, and to pause and pray before we respond. We also thank you for time to work and time to play, time to speak and time to listen. We ask you to help us to make the best use of our time today, tomorrow, and in the week ahead. Amen. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day. Goodbye.